reason I ask you about how confident you are of this president is because Harry Truman, every Republican's favorite Democratic president, said the buck stops here. It's the chief executive officer of the country who's responsible for economic confidence. Let me ask you about Carly Fiorina, the former CEO at Hewlett-Packard. She said that none of the candidates for president or vice president are capable of being a CEO of any major American company. Here she is on Today.
You were asked whether Sarah Palin has the experience to run a major company like Hewlett-Packard, which you did, and you said, no, I don't, but you know what? That's not what she's running for.
Well, I don't think John McCain could run a major corporation. I don't think Barack Obama could run a major corporation. I don't think Joe Biden could run a major corporation. But on the other hand, a major corporation is not the same as being the president or the vice president of the United States. It is a fallacy to suggest that the country is like a company. So, of course, to run a business, you have to have a lifetime of experience in business. But that's not what Sarah Palin, John McCain, Joe Biden, or Barack Obama are doing.
Did she just step in a puddle? I mean, what did she mean by that? I mean, if the government of the United States is 1.8 million workers, you have to run war policy, fiscal policy. You've got to appoint the chairman of the Fed. You've got to appoint the Supreme Court. You've got to oversee all the cabinet agencies of the federal government. All the agencies, independent and otherwise, are under your report. How can she say being CEO of the United States is not up to the level of running a business? What does she mean by that?
Well, you know, I'm not quite sure, to tell you the truth.
But his chief surrogate, Carly Fiorina, formerly of Hewlett-Packard, said today he's not qualified to run a single American business. But she says he could be a great president.
Could be a great president.
How does that work?
Business, but
he can't run a single business, and yet he can run the whole shebang.
Someone give me a bus so I can throw her under it.
How fast will she last before she's under that bus? I would say by tonight.
You've got to wonder. She's put herself under the bus 2 or 3 times now. And with all due respect, you know, she said that John McCain, neither John McCain nor Barack Obama nor Sarah Palin could have run Hewlett-Packard, and apparently neither could she.
Herbert Hoover said the fundamentals are sound back in '32. Why would he choose the very word that Herbert Hoover used? Is he Nick Hoover?
He's talking about the American worker, but he's also saying our economy is in crisis.
The American worker isn't what is described by the fundamentals of the economy. There are all those things that Chris just laid out. This isn't the. If he had just said it one time and he had misspoken, I would give him the benefit of the doubt. But he said it 16 times now in those exact words.
Here's how he explains himself today. Let's get the state-of-the-art version of fundamentals. Matt Lauer this morning with John McCain.
You said the fundamentals of the economy are strong, yet your campaign has released an ad saying that the economy is in crisis. Clarify this for me. Doesn't seem as if both things can be true.
Well, it's obviously true that the workers of America are the fundamentals of our economy and our strength and our future. And I believe in the American worker, and someone who disagrees with that is fine. We are in crisis. We all know that.
So when Lehman Brothers faces collapse and Merrill Lynch has to be bought by the Bank of America, we can say that the workers in those companies are good. Therefore, those companies are in good shape. Look, it's a meaningless statement. You could say that the American auto industry, the UAW worker out there, the man and woman's working his butt off or her butt off, they're working hard. But our auto industry is heavily challenged right now by overseas competition. Would you say it's fundamentally strong when it's facing threats from Toyota every day of the week?
I would say the economy is in crisis.
He's consistently opposed any effort to rein in Wall Street because he's been Mr. Deregulation. And this is exactly what we have to show for it.
He's talking
and now yesterday, he says the economy is fundamentally strong. This is somebody who says the economy isn't his strong suit, and he's proving it again and again and
again.
Let's
go to common sense land. Let's try to go away from the talk. If the American people got to vote on this kind of thing, would they spend $1 billion in building up the infrastructure? Right now, we've just made this commitment in Georgia, not down south in Dixie, in Georgia over there in Central Russia and Central Asia. Would the American people take $1 billion we have to borrow from the Chinese right now and borrow the money at current market rates and then send that $1 billion and tractors and everything else over to Georgia? Or would they spend that money, say, in Ohio or Pennsylvania? The priorities of this administration are neoconservative ideology. Why don't they spend the money here instead of on their ideological programs over in that part of the world where they're trying to, quote, spread democracy?
I would say that most Americans would rather have an investment in a volatile region of the world, spend $1 billion there, than the $1 billion in frivolous earmarks that Barack Obama has requested.
Would they spend $1 billion on developing the infrastructure, the transportation systems, the energy systems in our older states?
Chris, John McCain supports an investment in our infrastructure in this country, but we also can't turn our backs on volatile parts of the world.
I'm stunned by you, but you would never argue that if the Democrats did that.
That's absolutely not true.
$1 billion.
That's absolutely not true. When Bill Clinton was putting an investment into Bosnia in 1995, 1996, I thought that was a great idea.
The current federal deficit is $357 billion. That means every $1 billion we spend beyond that is borrowed. You would say it's good policy for us to borrow on the international markets in this time of financial crisis, another $1 billion on the world market, try to float bonds somewhere in the world so that we can spend that money over in Georgia?
Well, I don't think, look, this is not a zero-sum game. We have certain obligations.
Thank you, Todd.
No, I'm not finished. I wanted to finish.
Okay. We have certain obligations that we need to overseas to keep our country safe. But if you're talking about runaway spending in Washington, if you're talking about cutting pork and wasteful spending, there is not a single person in Washington who has fought harder against pork and against wasteful spending than John McCain.
For every foreign expenditure. And by the way, you talk about runaway spending. The spending's running away. It's going over to Iraq and over to that part of the world. All the money we're spending is over there.
Should we not be investing in Afghanistan? Should we just turn our backs on Afghanistan? Is that what I mean? Is that the alternative?
We're building roads and schools and bridges in Iraq. We're spending $10 billion a month there, and John McCain will stay for as long as it takes. This is exactly why we need to bring our troops home and get our resources back into this country, because not just is the Georgia $1 billion off the books, the entire Iraq expenditure is off the books. We're running a $500 billion deficit, and it looks like we're going to run that deficit as far as the eye can see. And if John McCain becomes president, he'll cut taxes and he'll add $300 billion a year to that deficit. It's just lunacy. And you talk about earmarks, but they're $18 billion a year. If you killed every single earmark every single year, it would take 100 years to retire the debt.
All I know is the spending priorities of this administration cannot be defended on national television. If your candidate goes in that debate with Barack Obama and has to defend $1 billion going to Georgia at this time when we don't have any money to spare, we're broke, we can't afford a single troop out of Iraq, I think it's a hard case to make.
Before we get to another comment, let's just roll that tape and the response from Obama.
There's too much corruption. There's too much excess. We can fix it. I believe in America. We can have a 9/11 commission such as we had after 9/11.
This isn't 9/11. We know how we got into this mess. What we need now is leadership that gets us out. I'll provide it. John McCain won't. And that's the choice for Americans in this election.
John, go ahead. Comment.
David, I think that potentially is a bigger mistake by John McCain than saying yesterday the fundamentals of the economy are sound.
I agree.
Essentially, he is underscoring the idea that I don't have a clue as to what's going on, and so we need to get some gumshoes and try to investigate. As I said, Barack Obama has been making the economic change argument for some time. It's pretty resonant with the American people, and he's got a fresh piece of sound that he can use to try to argue this guy doesn't get it.
And the reality is, Stephen Hayes, that there are people who were raising some red flags about subprime lending, what was happening on Wall Street. Pick up Fortune magazine. Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan was doing that back in 2006. So we understand what the idea is in terms of being too leveraged in the markets were when it came to this kind of lending.